because people were like, Sylvain, you're chief product officer at Breitling, being 34 years old. Why the hell are you trying to do something else? Stay in your line and be grateful for what you have. And all these people wanted to protect me because they could not see the project. So it's not like bad behavior or like pessimistic mindset. It's really like these guys are like, look, you are in a pretty good place. Like, just don't fuck it up.
This is Open Work, a look inside the watch industry, a podcast from Collective Horology. I'm Gabe Riley, co-founder of Collective.
And I'm Asher Rapkin, co-founder of Collective. Collective Horology is an independent watch retailer based in Southern California. We carry a wide range of independent brands, including Chapek, Holtenricks, Ming, and more. To learn more about us and check out our available inventory, visit collectivehorology.com.
Well, today we're talking about the rise of hype in independent watchmaking. Who even knew that was a thing until very recently? And look, we've discussed on this podcast that independent watchmaking was something of a backwater of the watch industry, or at best, the realm of the cognoscenti for years. But recently, creations from the likes of MB&F, Sylvain Berneron, Rexhep Rexhepi, and today's guest, Sylvain Berneron, have become objects of desire, cutthroat demand, and even speculation. How did it get this way? What are the drivers? And what role do the brands and watchmakers themselves play in this economy of hype?
Of course, as we mentioned, today's guest is Sylvain Berneron, a French-born industrial and fine arts-trained designer who, after early roles in automotive design at BMW, moved into the watch world, spending 5 years at Breitling, ultimately ending up as the chief product officer, and earlier working for the Richemont Group on brands such as IWC and Jaeger LeCoultre. In 2022, Sylvain founded his independent brand, Berneron, which is based in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, and launched the Mirage collection, noted for its all-gold movement and shaped asymmetric case. And this summer, he unveiled his second collection, the Quantième Annuel. Both collections are highly limited, and variants are produced in just 24 units every single year. Sylvain, welcome to Open Work. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Hi, Gabe. Hi, Asher. Thank you very much for having me today.
Oh, of course. So let's dive right in. I mentioned while we were in the waiting room before we started talking that I had the opportunity to go hands-on with a early Mirage that a mutual friend of ours owned. And while I didn't get to experience it much beyond the bar that I was in, I did get to spend some time with it in person. And I found it to be an utterly beguiling watch. But I want to get into how you ended up at that particular design and how that began what has now become the eponymous brand. So can you talk a little bit about where you, just as an origin story, where the brand came from and why you decided to start with the Mirage?
So as you mentioned, I had a career in the corporate world in big brands. So I had the chance to develop multiple calibers during these years. And I quickly realized that you can't bend the laws of physics, and therefore you have to make choices. And the Mirage is a project. So the watch basically is wrapped around its train of gears. So the shape of the Mirage really comes from the caliber. So I really started this project by drawing a cinematic chain, so a train of wheels, to my ultimate desire. And that was a scene movement, a flying barrel with 3 days of power reserve, a large balance wheel, like a pocket watch style, and a direct small second. These were pretty much the features that I wanted to have in this watch, simply because it was my Christmas list, if you like, of what would my ultimate dress watch would integrate. So I really started from a blank piece of paper, and quickly in that process, I realized that either I would have a very large watch, which I didn't want to have to keep that movement, or I would have to sacrifice the movement, reduce the barrel, make it thicker or whatever, which were the usual trade-offs that I used to have to make in my corporate career. And this is where the idea came to simply go as tight around the gears as I possibly could to sort of try to make it more compact. So it was really a try and error process, and it came very organically. I didn't set off and start a project saying, okay, I'm going to make an asymmetric watch. The asymmetry is really a consequence of the technical development of the project.
I want to ask a couple of questions about that, because we've had some conversations in the past with other both watchmakers and watch designers that we know, that we admire. I'm thinking right now of Marco Borrachino, for example, at Singer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Marco talks about when he talks about watch design is that, generally speaking, in the education world, so to speak, in Switzerland, it has been largely his impression that a lot of people are taught how to make watches as engineers, so how to make movements essentially. But watch design as a skill set unto its own is a much more vague area of study. And I'm curious, when you start talking about starting with a caliber, so looking at the gear train and then ultimately having the watch come together around it, can you talk a little bit about your creative process there? Because an asymmetric watch can come to life in many, many, many different ways, but the look and the feel of this watch is extremely distinct and very recognizable. So when you started with that gear train, how did that start to lead into inspiring the creative execution of the watch? Or was that just an organic move that came out of the design of that movement?
So initially, I drew the train of gears. I was like, okay, I'm very happy with that. That movement is thin enough, will perform correctly, and I would be delighted as a collector to wear that thing. Then the bad surprise was, oh shit, it's very big, and that's way too large for being, in my opinion, a proper dress watch, which in my book should be under 39 mil, so to speak, between like 35 to 39-ish. That's at least my conception of it. Should be manual wind, precious metal, and thin or compact. So in order to solve the size issue, I decided to go asymmetric. And at that point, it was a very dreamy. It was just me drawing on my screen in the weekends and the evenings. I had no business plan. No, it was more a creative outlet, if you like, while retaining a corporate job. So I was really just having fun, no stress, no, not even an agenda behind. It was just fantasizing. And so basically, eventually what I ended up doing was drawing a case back around that movement. And I had the back of the watch before the front. And when I flipped it on the other side, I was like, okay, I think good design objects, especially in a watch, is when you have a dialogue between the movement and the dial to make it complete. So I was like, okay, how can I, on the dial side, sort of illustrate or give a clue to a new spectator of what he or she can expect when he will turn the watch on the backside. This is where the entire formal language of the twisted numbers and the twisted indices and the twisted hands came around, because I thought it was a nice way to express the complete unusual way into which this watch has been created, which was basically let the gears play free, if you want, and then wrap a case around it. So that's pretty much the creative process around it. So it's completely inverted compared to a regular watch where you draw a case, a dial, and then you fit a movement inside. Here is the complete opposite. And in that sense, I guess it is really form follows function for the Mirage, which is the main ethos of industrial design.
It's funny that you mentioned kind of doing this on nights and weekends, that this was sort of this creative outlet and passion project, your Christmas wish list of watch design and watch features. It's funny because that's kind of the way Asher and I started Collective. This was a project we did while we also had corporate jobs. We were working at Facebook, and fortunately, we were lucky that was a place, at least at that time, that allowed and encouraged employees to have and start a business outside of the company. And we were able to start this business, grow it, and nurture it in a way that ultimately made it possible. But I think that undersells the risks that are still involved in starting a business. You know, when you say, oh, well, I was working at Breitling and this was my passion project, I think it's easy for someone to say, oh, well, it sounds like this guy didn't really take any risks. He had it easy. You know, he had a full-time job while he was doing this on nights and weekends and just transitioned one thing right into the other. That kind of sounds ideal. But of course, as anyone who's ever started a business knows, no matter how you start it, and how it comes to be, there are so many sacrifices involved. And we're going to talk a lot about the desirability of your work and the Mirage, but I think it's worth putting that into context and helping understand people what was required and what sacrifices and risks you needed to take to get this project and to get this brand off the ground. So rather than just painting the picture of drawing in your sketch pad on the nights and weekends, can you tell us about what was actually involved in starting this business? What were the risks that you had to take that maybe people wouldn't appreciate?
So I came to realize that every puzzle is different. So the starting point for any entrepreneurship adventure is very singular to each and every one of us. In my case, I didn't have an investor or a bank or a huge bag of money to rely on, although I did have substantial bag of money. So I said it publicly multiple times. I founded this business entirely on my own through 2 installments of 500,000 Swiss francs, which is total of 1 million, which was effectively the entire money I've ever earned through 17 years of corporate career, and especially the bigger paychecks of my Breitling career as an executive. So this is how I founded the business. The level of risk involved was 100% because I could have lost it all. Where I mitigated the risk was that the 3 first years I managed to decrease my participation at Breitling through working from 100 to 80 down to 50% while growing my participation into my own project. And that helped me to sort of not have a salary cut in the process, which I could have afforded, but would have diminished the cash at disposal that I had to make that project become a reality. So these are the sort of levers I used to solve my own puzzle. So that's the financials. The risk is 100%. So I could have lost it all definitely because I had no orders whatsoever when I started. And overall, I've been working 5 years, 7 days a week. And only now, the company will be 5 years old in a few months. Only now I start to get my weekends back, and then my friends discover me again. But I basically disappeared from the social life for the past 4 years easily.
So I empathize with that massively. I know Gabe does as well. I'd like to explore a little bit of around investors and things in that nature, because one thing that comes up a lot when I remember when we were deciding that we wanted to do this full time and realizing, as I'm sure you probably knew a little bit better than we did, the significant amount of capital required to have on hand, that we began exploring all potential options, whether that would be self-funding, which is what we also decided to do ultimately, or thanks. It's a lot easier looking back than looking forward. But that's what we did. But at the same time, everyone we spoke to gave us the advice that you should use other people's money, which of course led us to exploring.
Well, not everyone. One person didn't, and I'm glad we took his advice.
Yes, fair point. One person didn't.
That was so shout out to Mike DiMartini of Everest Bands and Monta. He's given us a lot of good advice in this stuff.
But putting Mike aside, a lot of people encouraged us to pursue investment or encouraged us to pursue the ever famous small business loan, which isn't really a thing here in America anymore. So we did explore briefly the idea of investment, and we came to our own conclusions about why that wasn't right for us. I'm curious, did you ever explore that? And now that you have seen financial and critical success, how have you handled the inevitable reach outs from people saying, well, I'd love to invest in your business? We've asked this question of other folks like Max Booster and gotten some really interesting answers. I'm curious for your perspective.
As you said, the perception of people has vastly changed compared from the beginning to now. And I've noticed the change over the course of the past 5 years. In the beginning, that hasn't been a discussion at all because the project was considered, and I quote, a professional suicide from most of people that I ever presented it to. Because people were like, Sylvain, you are chief product officer at Breitling, being 34 years old. Why the hell are you trying to do something else? Stay in your line and be grateful for what you have, please. Like don't try.
Wait, hey, did people literally tell you to be grateful for what you had?
Of course, because that position alone is a career achievement in itself for somebody like me who studied design, etc., to end up in one of the largest watch brands as a chief executive. As a chief product officer in the executive committee is already a respectable career path for an industrial designer. And the fact that I achieved that being 34, people were like, dude, like just, don't be too greedy is not the word, too ambitious. Like sort of appreciate the journey, look back and just enjoy it. And to me, it has never been about more money or more exposure or more fame or whatever. It was just, I really want, and I still want to push the creative boundaries. This is what moves me. And I took that job at Breitling to be a creative, to be a chief product officer, simply not for the paycheck, but simply because I saw it could bring me in a position where I could let the creative spirits speak freely. Truth of the matter is, unless it is your company, and I know you guys relate, you will always have to ask for permission. Even if you give $10 to a guy and you let him buy 1% of your company, if you decide to make a stupid decision tomorrow, even if he doesn't decide, you have to call the guy and let him know at least, right? And in my discipline, industrial design and art, in a sense, I think the most important thing is the personal endangerment that you put in the work. And for me, the Mirage was the perfect picture of that. It's like I really put myself on the line and I say, look, guys, this is the vision. What would a watch built around its gear look like? I embark on this journey to discover that and build a watch to the best of my abilities. And through this process, I will take tremendous risk, but this is art and this is what I want to do. So in the beginning, nobody wanted to hear about it. I've been heavily discouraged to do it. And all these people wanted to protect me because they could not see the project. So it's not like bad behavior or like pessimistic mindset. It's really like these guys are like, look, you are in a pretty good place. Like, just don't fuck it up.
So to that end, one more question about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the market's reaction to the first watch. Insofar as you're comfortable, can you tell me a little bit about how it went over with Georges Kern when you told him that you wanted to leave and start your own company? How was he receptive to that? How was the board receptive to that? I mean, it's one thing for, someone who's like a designer to leave. It's another thing for the designer to leave. So talk to us a little bit about what the internal experience at Breitling was like when you let them know what you were going to do.
Yeah, sure. So of course, it is not an easy discussion to go to your boss and to say, look, I'd like to do more, but I'd like to do more on my own. That's the second, because the first part of the discussion is always
it's like, of course.
But the second part is harder to pull off. So for anybody who knows George is a very knowledgeable person when it comes to product. So he always helped me a great deal to have the full amplitude that I needed at Breitling to acquire the resources, the time, the budget to revamp the portfolio. And I think we've done a pretty good job at Breitling over the course of the first 5 years to develop, to grow the brand, thanks to his vision and his decisions. And the guy is brave, powerful, not afraid. So I benefited from all that. Now, that being said, my creative dreams had no place at Breitling. We both knew that. Yeah, like you put Breitling on a Mirage, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So I didn't inject that creative juice at Breitling because it was off topic, and George would not have let me do it either. So it was a non-discussion. If I wanted to pursue the Mirage project, I had to do it on my own. So in the beginning, I didn't know how big of a thing it would be. Maybe it could have been, look, I just need a couple of days a week to have fun, make a prototype. And maybe once I made one watch, maybe that's enough and I don't need to do more. Sometimes that's all it takes to satisfy a dream. So I went and negotiated 1 day off per week. So I basically negotiated with him to not work for Breitling on Fridays and work on my own. It was written black and white in my contract that I was allowed to pursue a watchmaking endeavor under my own name, which means not allowed to work for other brands of any kind. I was publicly associated to Breitling as a board member, but I had the right on the side to go to suppliers and order stuff for myself, which is, I still believe Breitling has image and reputation has not been damaged at any point in this process. And I always took very good care of that point in the entire process. Long story short, I started with 1 day per week, which quickly became a Friday, Saturday, Sunday project. Because as you know, when you create a small business, the workload is the only thing that doesn't shrink down.
Sure.
And at the end, I came back to him and I said, look, I'm having fun doing it first. It's taking a lot more time than I thought it would. And now that I sort of embarked on this journey, the worst thing I could do is to do half of a commitment. So I'd like to embark more. And for a year, I did a 50-50 because I also wanted to complete my mission for George at Breitling. And I promised him that I would revamp the entire product portfolio, which I did in 5 years. And then I was allowed to go free and we split it in good terms. There is no beef of any kind. And again, every puzzle is different. In my case, I didn't have the cash to sort of pull the plug and do 100% my own business from the get-go. And my chance in that equation was that George was open-minded enough to let me have the transition. If I was working at Richemont, I know for a fact that the compliance of the group would have absolutely forbid any kind of part-time project on the side. It's simply not in line with the corporate compliance.
It's interesting you mentioned, having to go out into the world and navigate suppliers. And I know Asher wants to talk about the reaction of clients in the market to the watch, which we should and we will. But I'm kind of curious, you start with 1 day a week, which becomes 3 and grows from there. And you go out into the watch industry on your own and begin approaching suppliers and other vendors and partners to help you make this thing. What were some of the challenges you had to deal with there? Because I would imagine, this is your first project out on your own, and the world of suppliers in the Swiss watch industry is a very complicated minefield to navigate on many levels. What were some of the challenges you ran into in just trying to make this thing?
So the first challenge is to come to the realization that being a board member at Breitling doesn't allow you any type of guarantees when you go out on your own. If you start your own business, you're back to stage 0, and all you have is maybe the network, but you do not have the sort of traction that you have when you come with your Breitling hat on. So I had 3 types of reaction, from the harshest to the most friendly one. Harshest was, you're a Breitling employee, Breitling board member, regardless of your contract. I do not want to have any conflict, so I work for Breitling. I don't want to hear about that. It's like, okay, fine. Second, the middle ground is, I don't know you, your watch is weird. And you don't order many components. So the only way that this will work is that if you pay 100% at order and you wait until I can manage to deliver.
Wow, what a deal.
Well, the truth has to be said. You will hear a lot of stories in the supply industry of small family-owned company who had unpaid bills from very promising young business owners.
Sure.
So these guys have to protect themselves, and I understand. So I did do more than half of my components, maybe 3/4 of my components have been made through that method. I was like, okay, I don't ask you to promote me or sponsor me by any means. I will pay my components now at order. Just please don't forget about it and deliver in time, otherwise I will starve. So that was 75% of my orders. And then a few suppliers, which are friends, which I've known for a long time. For example, the families that make my dials still today. He used to call me every second week and say, look, Sylvain, he was part of the friends who tried to convince me not to do it. He was like, can you please reconsider? Like, you don't need to prove anything. We know you're a good designer. You're creative. Like, I'm afraid you'll get hurt doing this. And he's a supplier, so he's seen multiple brands come and go and start and die and stuff. So, and this was his perspective. And I was like, look, I really appreciate it's already hard enough. Just don't demotivate me some more. Please, just like, let me, if you disagree, I understand. Just like, do not add more weight on my shoulders, please. And he was like, yeah, sure, I get it. And as a matter of the fact, this is why I'm calling you. I decided, although I disagree very much with your idea, I will make your dials for free and you will pay me when you will have sold the first watches. And it was his way of saying, I do not believe in it one bit, but if I can be your airbag when you will hit the wall, at least let me make your dials for free. That was, so I've been very touched. We agreed to do that. To be honest, it helped me a great deal because I had to spend 100% on the other components, so that created quite a big cash hole. And I've paid all my dials because I sold my watches, and now we reverted back very recently, so 3 years after, to the traditional method. And I was very pleased to tell him, look, dude, you've helped us a great deal, but now let's use the standard method. Like, I pay 50 when I order and I pay the other 50 when you deliver. So that's a great friendship story, and I will never forget.
That's beautiful. This paints a pretty stark picture. You've struck out on your own. You've gotten advice from all sorts of people in your life not to do this. You've risked it all financially. You're navigating this minefield of Swiss watch production, which is tough and is continuing to sort of bleed you out financially. Like, if anyone wants to romanticize the idea of starting a watch brand, consider this. However, I would imagine that things, look, nothing lasts forever, right? So things can change. And at some point, I would imagine you start seeing light and you start sharing your work with clients. And what started as something that was obviously a very personal design and something you literally created for yourself, you start to share with other people and start to, I would assume, take orders on and sell. And when did you know that you had created something that not only was meaningful to you and that you loved, but when did you start to get the sense from clients and collectors that you had created something that resonated with them?
The answer might surprise you, but I started to have that gut feeling that it was worth pursuing that project when I saw the epidemic resistance that I faced at the supply level. When people were literally closing the door on me and trying to dissuade me to do it. As an artist, that moves me quite a bit. I'm like, okay, when you have resistance there, it excites me. And I'm like, okay, the hardest it gets, the more rewarding it will be, right? So the more you tell me no, it's like telling a kid, do not open that door. You can go everywhere in the house, but do not open that door. Guess what's going to happen? So from that time on, I only focused on that one door. So that's pretty much what happened to me. I had the gut feelings that it needed to be done just to sort of crack the code and prove a point that you can spend a lot of money to do something that looks very unserious and still lend it into a luxury item in the shape of a watch and still be something artistically valuable. Which is why I agreed effectively to spend so much money, all the money I had, into making it. And then, of course, the most scary part is, as you said, when you have the first prototype and you go out there and you submit it to people that you trust, because in the beginning it's like a baby. You don't present your baby to the first stranger in the street. You show it to your family, friends, and neighbors. So I came with my baby and then presented it. I also wanted to test the water with very esteemed and respected collectors such as Ronnie Madvani, Auro Montanari, Laurent Picciotto, Fred Mandelbaum, Nadine Gone, Alan Ben Joseph, for this matter. All these guys have decades of watchmaking watch collecting or even watch industry under their belt. And the feedback has been extraordinary. Like all of a sudden, I had not only good feedback, but orders on top of that. And I was completely not ready because it was way too early. And for the record, I had to create the legal structure to send my first invoice to fulfill Laurent Picciotto's request. It was like, yes, I'd like to acquire one of these watches I've been collecting for 30 years. And it's the first time somebody sort of inverts the way in which you create a watch. And just for that reason only, I'm interested in being a part of it. And he owns, as a consequence, number 001 in white gold. And yeah, the rest is history.
At what point did it become? It's so funny. You had to set up a business entity just to even sell the thing. We've been in that position, but at what point did it become clear that the demand for this product was going to outpace your ability to produce it?
When we started to deliver the watches. So in the beginning, you show the watch, you post a few pictures, everyone is excited about it. But until it materializes into physical objects in the market, it is still a very dreamy and foggy attention you receive. Once you start delivering watches and they change hands in watch meetups and then they get exposed and they get displayed and people talk about it. So the first year, when I delivered my first watches, the number of emails we received, we received 600 emails in 2 days when I started deliver the first ones because people started to see, and it was sort of the official launch. 6 months after that, the watch received the Audacity prize at the GPHG. Then I received another 1,000 emails in 2 days. Considering that the total production of the first Mirage is 240 pieces in total. So we had received 1,500 emails that alone. And the problem is, as the narrative progresses, and I launched a second product with the stone dials and now a third product with the Quantième, the sort of traction compounds and adds year after year. So, now we are at our third consecutive launch year with the Quantième this year. This year, we've received 1,600 emails in 3 days when we came back from the show, and it took the team 3 weeks to sponge this and to treat it and to answer it. The level of traction we received is 10x would be an understatement. We receive way too many emails and requests, and thank God there are not all firm orders because that would be an absolute nightmare. But we could manufacture 10 times what we assemble, and we would still have a wait list as we speak.
I think, when most people think about starting a business in the way you described, you make this intense sacrifice, you create something really personal, you risk it all, and then you have this reception that is, incredibly, incredibly strong. The average business out there would simply say, this is amazing. There's a lot of demand for what we're creating, maybe even more demand than we knew. Fantastic. We're going to staff up. We're going to quadruple our production. We're going to turn this business, whatever it is, in this case, a watch brand, into this big behemoth watch brand, and roll out all these models and expand our product line and produce more and meet this demand and make a lot of money. But you've been very clear from the beginning, as you said, for each watch, 24 pieces a year for 10 years, 240 production. That's it. And you've stuck by that. Mm-hmm. And in a world where, forget the watch industry, but in a world where the general mindset about business is sort of growth at all costs, why have you made a decision to limit production? I think a lot of people feel that production is limited in the watch industry to create scarcity, manufactured scarcity, but I doubt that's the reason here. So I'd love to know why 240 watches of a particular variant and 24 pieces per year per watch is enough.
So there are multiple answers to your question. From a corporate standpoint, because we are self-founded, I have nobody to answer to. If I had been founded by a bank or investors, they would tell me, now you ramp up that shit and you make it rewarding for us who believed in you. It would not have been a question. I don't have to do that. So that's from the corporate structure. From a brand equity perspective, I believe ramping up production too quickly is actually sacrificing any type of solid perspective for the future. The product needs time to anchor itself into the market. And you cannot, if you want, I will come back to the kid picture. If you have a new kid, or if you adopt a kid, it will take you a couple of years to sort of cement that relationship. If I give you 5, 10, 15 kids to adopt, it doesn't stick. So that's also why I make a very limited amount of product. I do not dilute with additional references because I want the market to sort of hug that product and have time to know it. Which is very difficult because that heavily diminishes your potential traction in the short term, to have an exciting narrative and to say, look, my new limited edition, look, my new collaboration, look this, look that. But I believe if you stick to it and you have the discipline, it pays dividend on the long run because you haven't changed your line and all of a sudden what seemed a bit austere becomes a value of character, becomes a strong brand equity, so to speak. And finally, when it comes to the number 24, as you said, every time I release a new product, our current number is 24. So this year we launched the Quantième Annuel. I will make 24 silver dials and 24 black dials. That's 48 watches per year. And there is a precise reason behind that number. It's because let's imagine worst case scenario, the three of us are entrepreneurs and we plan for the best, we hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. Usually, if you're, we have to.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. So hoping for the best, planning for the worst. I'm like, okay, worst scenario. Let's imagine I've missed something in the conception or quality isn't there or whatever, or we miss something in the assembly process and all the 48 watches break down. It will be very tough. But 48 watches in a year, that means I have one watch per week to fix. It will cost me a fortune to bring them back. It will be a nightmare. It will be a shit year, sorry to say. But one watch per week is still manageable. I can still manage. Now, if I play the greedy guy and I push you 300 new Quantièmes because I know I can move them out and it's a huge spike in my turnover and they all break down, the company goes under right away because I do not have the resources to swallow such a big return in after sales. And I create a huge cash hole being busy to fix stuff I invoiced the year prior and not being able to deliver the stuff I should be delivering on that year. So there is a pocket of sort of industrial growth that my company can leverage for year plus one. And that pocket has a limit size. And if you exceed that size, you're putting your company at risk. And it's vital risk. It's live or die. It's not like risk, risking my money. Now I have 10 employees, and I'm not messing with their salaries or their livelihood. So I have to mitigate the risk in that extent.
So putting that part of the conversation aside, I want to talk a little bit about the external facing reality of running a business of small yield but high demand, which is an interesting challenge that everybody handles in a different way. So you gave us a pretty eye-popping number that you had something like 1,600 inquiries after a recent watch show, which is obviously wildly out of proportion with 48 potential slots. One thing that gets discussed by collectors on the regular, and I think a lot of people have opinions around this, is this idea of how allocation happens and nepotism and the related component there. And, only certain people get this, that, or the other. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about how you approach that, because I know when we look at watches that we have that are in high demand, and granted, we're a retailer, obviously, but there are a lot of factors that we take into play when we think about who we're going to offer that to and how we allocate watches like that. And it's taken us a lot of time and thought to figure out the right way to do that, which isn't to say that we don't, I'm sure, trip over ourselves trying to figure it out on occasion. But talk a little bit about how you do that and why you landed on the process that you landed on. And I'm also curious, insofar as you're comfortable, to talk about any mistakes you made and lessons you've learned as you think about that allocation process.
So I will start from the mistakes. And I think you and I are in the same boat on that, in the fact that if somebody wants to betray you, he can tell you whatever he or she wants to tell you. So if somebody comes in our company and says with his hand on his heart and say, I'm a through and through collector, I love your work, I will buy it and give that watch to my children, to my kids, and I will never sell it. You give the trust. This guy buys the watch and flips it the next day. There is no way I can break that code. And as a brand, I do not want to put myself in some sort of a interviewing position where I would have to, because of that phenomenon, bother the trusty collectors, which actually behave well, by asking them a lot of questions and sometimes very indiscreet questions, because I've heard some allocating processes, which to me are not elegant. It's not the way I want my company to behave, where you have to provide informations of how many pieces you bought and what do you own and how long do you keep them and blah, blah, blah. I would never do that, simply because here is my family name on the dial and this is not who I am. This is not how I treat people. So the way I treat people is I give you 100% of my trust from day one, and you have the full power to betray me once. If you decide to take my trust and throw it in the garbage to make a quick profit or do whatever it is that you want to achieve, I will gladly let you do it. But the consequence will be that I will no longer be interested into investing in that relationship. This is all. And it's not a threat by any means or anything. It's just, I think this is how good friendship is built. This is how good working relationship is built. Same goes with love. A love relationship, like in my marriage, I have a ring in my hand, but the trust my wife and I have with each other is all what holds a marriage together. So I cultivate trust, and I think that the best way to do it is for me to give the trust. So our brand, we give the trust 100%, and I've been screwed a few times already, and that's fine. And it hurts me because some guys promised me the moon and really stabbed me badly. But it's fine. I'm prepared for it. And as I always say to my team, we don't lose. We either win or we learn.
That's a very honorable and honest answer. And I'm curious, taking that to that next step, 2 questions. One, how then do you decide? Like, if I want a Mirage and I come to you, what is your criteria and your structure for making that decision? And then what do I need to do? What kind of financial commitment do I need to make? And why did you make that choice of that amount? Second question related to that, because you are producing watches that will deliver years after they're ordered, you have mentioned, I believe, in the case of the Quantième Annuel, that there is potential for evolving price over time. So how do you manage that? Because that's trust going from you to the client too. And a client's making a commitment to buy a product that may have an evolving price point as well. And that goes both ways. So how do you decide who's going to get that piece and what do you need from them to lock it in? And then how do you communicate with clarity to a client that there might be an evolved price based on what they committed to 3 years prior? Because we certainly notice, and I completely respect and understand this. If I'm going to make a commitment or a client's going to make a commitment to a 6-figure watch, they need to know how to plan for that. And that's not insignificant. So how do you approach that?
So your first question, allocating process. We have 3 rules. First, as I told you, because we have to give the trust to strangers, the first rule is first come, first served, with 2 leverage that everybody can bring. First, we give priority to the people we physically met and the people who physically saw the watches. Why? It's because we know you know what you're buying and we know who you are, which I think is better for both parties rather than selling a 6-figure watch to somebody who will discover it when he will open the box. I think, so that's why if you can visit us at the workshop or during a watch show, that obviously plays heavily in your favor to have a quicker allocation if we have one available. The second one we do is a market mitigation. And by that, I mean, if I would have let the organic demand play its role, 2/3 of our production would have landed in Asia last year. We had an immense demand in Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, mainland China. The Mirage seems to have an extremely positive feedback there, especially. And again, trying to build a stable brand and to have an even split across different markets, I asked the team to make sure we balance the allocations over the 4 different key markets, which are US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. That's my Breitling experience speaking. I think it's better for every party involved to not have big bags of watches sitting at the same place for too long. It's not good. So these are the 2 leverage that we apply. Physical visit and physical location in the world if we can mitigate this. And based on these 3 criteria, the first being first come, first served. So the highest criteria is how old your request is. That will always be. So the best is to contact us early, come and visit us, and hopefully be in a not too saturated market. If you hit these 3, you will get a watch within a year. So that's for the allocation. And the second question was, the evolving price point. This is, speaking of learning about mistakes. Since day one, this is on me because I communicated very badly. Everybody understands that I pre-plan my price increase when in fact, so if you go on our website, you will see that the Quantième is 120 next year, 130 the year after, and 140 in year 3. Truth of the matter is, the watch cost 140 as it is, and we, as we always did, agree to degrade our margin in year 1 and year 2, because I think that the collector who pulls the trigger very early deserves the reward of the risk he or she takes. And by that I mean, last year, we came to Watches and Wonders in Geneva with a plastic dummy. So it was a watch 3D printed in plastic, in gray plastic, monochrome gray plastic. And based on that dummy, we collected 35 deposits of 60,000 Swiss francs.
Wow.
And so you are in the business as well. You know how much commitment it takes from a collector to unlock 60 Gs.
Yeah.
This no small feat. And these people, I'm sorry, and I will stick to that line. These guys deserve a 20,000 Swiss franc discount on the original price because they fueled the project for the others coming later. So, and I did this for the Mirage 38. The people who bought it in year 1 had it at a discount compared to year 2 and year 3. I did the same for the Mirage Stone Dials. And only in year 3, the watch sort of goes up to its regular price and holds its price until the end of the production run.
Are you going to do that moving forward as you gain more and more credibility and more confidence in your ability to deliver? Because I understand why you would do that on the very first watch or arguably the second, but for the 4th model, the 5th model, the 6th model, are you going to continue offering that?
I haven't decided yet because, to be honest with you, my collector's hat guy tells me, do it, it's cool, and you have to reward the early collectors and to be honest, I wouldn't give
But there's
you.
decreasing risk over time, right? I mean, you have 10 employees, you've delivered watches. Like the presumed risk of the guy who put down the money on the very first Mirage is not the same as the person putting down money on something 5 years from now, I would imagine. Unless you've come up with something so outrageous and never been done before, et cetera, that there is something like that.
It's not only our ability to execute and to deliver, it's also the risk you take to sort of adopt a new watch. And as you know, our designs tend to be pretty unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I made 2 launches with the Mirage 38 and the Mirage 34. And then out of the woods, I come with this round watch, which is called the Quantième, and which is a complete departure from what my brand is known for. So, and on top of that, it's a very complicated watch, and the price point is twice as more. It goes from 65 to 140. So there is not a single metric on the Quantième which capitalizes on the success of the Mirage, which costed me a great deal of trouble with my existing clients, by the way, because I had clients who told me, look, Sylvain, I supported you on the Mirage. I don't get the Quantième, and I don't understand why you are throwing it all in the bin to start a round watch. Well, what's wrong with you? And I told these guys, look, first of all, thank you for trying to protect me again.
Thank you for your feedback.
But it's my family name on the dial, so I will always be the guy deciding who we are and who we are not. And from a brand building perspective, my goal was to plant the 2 tentpoles of the brand to acquire a wide territory of expression. And by that, I mean the Quantième, the Mirage is thin, asymmetric, technically simple because it's a 3-hand, and the Quantième is the polar opposite. It's thicker, it's extremely complex, and it's entirely symmetric. And if I can blend these 2 poles, all of a sudden I have a wide amplitude of creative expressions that I can live within to build a nice narrative with the brand. If I had decided to play it safe, so to speak, and sort of capitalize on the Mirage for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I could very quickly box myself into restricted narrative.
So one of the things that's come up here, and I think this is true of so many independent brands, successful independent brands. And when I mean that, I mean like creatively successful independent brands. They have a point of view. They know who they are. They have a perspective on watchmaking, but more importantly, a perspective on the world. I mean, look at the watches of Urwerk, right? I mean, this is not just a perspective on watchmaking. It's creative point of view expressed through watches. And, you've made it clear that this has been something that's really personal for you. I'm curious, if you were to give advice to anyone, what advice do you have? And maybe a better way of asking it is, what's the best advice you ever received when you started out in this endeavor? Or what's, looking back on it, some of the advice you wish you received? I mean, for me and Asher, one clear defining moment, like I said, was I remember talking to Mike DiMartini, the owner of Everest and Monta, and he gave us the advice when we were thinking about funding to never give a piece of our business to anyone unless we absolutely have to, and even then, don't do it. And that stuck with me, and I'm glad we had that advice. Now, that's not really personal or very creative advice, but I'm curious, what's the best advice you ever received or you wish you had received that you would pass on to people looking to do something like you do, or really take any risk in the world?
The best advice I've received was from my mother when I was young drawing. I remember she used to tell me that you'll be judged at the end of the work, because I remember this feeling. I was drawing as a kid, and my brother or a friend or somebody would come and say, "Oh, that's weird," or "Oh, that's not very beautiful," or whatever, but it was not finished. And back then I used to drop my pen and go do something else because it had heavily demotivated me. And my mother would come and say, "You'll be judged at the end. Finish your work. And only when you are satisfied, you will present it to people, and then you'll be judged. But until it's not finished, the cards have not been played. And you have to stick to that." So And I think true is for a small drawing, true is for a professional project, and true is for life. You will be judged at the end. and and so that's my best advice to anybody who wants to start a business, who wants to start, I don't know, a relationship, even a project or a painting or whatever. If you see something in your mind, if you truly believe it's good and it's worth investing your time into it, and sometimes it's your stomach whispering into you, because we are so polluted these days by notifications and Black Friday and then whatever the modern society might need your attention for, that it's very hard to listen to these whispers. But we all have passion projects that are buried in ourselves. If you feel you have the courage to do it on your own, just close your ears, do it. And only when you'll be finished, you can accept judgment. So in my case, this is what saved me, because I kept going with my friends on the side. It's like running a marathon with your friends telling you, don't you want to be here? Don't you want to stop? Don't you want to on the sides? And they try to distract you from what you're trying to achieve. So being stubborn and not listening to others. If this is your project, do it the way you envision it. If you win, it will be even more rewarding. I can't tell you how rewarding it is for me when I have some people who see the Mirage in the metal and telling me, oh, wow, now I get it. I was not your early supporter. I thought that project was weird. I didn't get it, blah, blah, blah. Now I have to watch in my hands and now I get it. This is extremely, it almost heals all the 1,000 cuts that I had to go through in the process. So yeah, number one advice is and it's the hardest. It's like, listen to your intuition. We all have an intuition. Listen to it. And it's one thing to take wise advice from people, and it's another to let yourself being influenced in what you're trying to achieve. Don't let people influence the nature of what you do. How are you going to do it? Like in your case, not taking equity on the way is an advice on how, but it's not an advice on what. It's not like the guy convinced you to do another business, right? You did what you wanted to do and you agreed to listen to a few advice here and there on the way. And that's fine because you've been helped. But if I had let somebody tell me to do a round watch instead because it's safer, that would have been a terrible failure. So yeah, you'll be judged at the end.
It's funny, when I worked in advertising, there's a famous quote from advertising legend Bill Bernbach, who's one of the founders of DDB, which is a big global advertising agency now. But in any event, Bill Bernbach had all these amazing quotes about creativity, really. And you can imagine advertising is a very high pressure environment. It's a very commercial environment. There are a lot of deadlines. There's corporate politics, client meetings, a lot of urgency going on. And as a creative, he would always chastise the business people who were very keen to put work in front of clients and present things on time and things like that. And he would say, no one is going to remember a missed meeting or a blown deadline. They're going to remember a good ad. And he's right. If the work wasn't ready, it wasn't ready. And there are all sorts of pressures and everyone else around you, their urgency can be very contagious, but something is ready when it's ready, and it's only worth doing if it's worth doing well. So Sylvain, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing what you did with us. Like I said, what you've created is not only remarkable in terms of watchmaking and creativity, but it very much is a personal and true expression of you and who you are. Thank you for doing that. That's hard to do.
Thank you very much, Gabe and Asher, for having me today. I hope we'll have the pleasure to meet at Watches and Wonders next year. Drinks are on me. It would be lovely to spend, watch meet classic vibe. It would be cool.
Hey, free drinks. I'm in. Thanks again, Sylvain, and thank you for listening. Open Work is, of course, a production of Collective Horology. You can find us at collectivehorology.com, and you can find our guest, Sylvain Berneron, online at berneron.ch. Of course, please get in touch with your questions, your feedback, or suggestions, and to do that, just email podcast@collectivehorology.com.